Now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. We have Emily Walsh, President of Observer Media Group. So, and then I believe Peter has a full introduction.
As was said, Emily is President of the Observer Media Group. It's a family-owned multimedia company that publishes 7 newspapers, 6 magazines, 4 websites, mobile apps, and multiple social channels in Florida. Previously, Emily, a 4th-generation newspaper woman, has served as publisher, chief digital officer, and social editor. If there are any really difficult questions asked of her, you may see our guest pirouette out of the room, as interestingly enough, she was a professional ballerina with the Sarasota Ballet from 1995 to 2000. In her spare time, Emily firmly believes in giving back to her profession and community. She serves as a member of the board of directors of the Florida Press Association, Bay Park Conservancy, which we are all very interested in, Sarasota Chamber of Commerce, and Neuro Challenge Foundation for Parkinson's disease. Emily is a member of the Leadership Florida Cornerstone, Class 34, and the International Women's Forum. Emily's awards and achievements are too numerous to list and would take much of her allotted time if I tried to do so. So it is important, however, to note that she resides in Sarasota with her husband, Pat Robinson, Deputy City Manager of the City of Sarasota, her son, Reese, Barry, and stepson, Colin Robinson. I'm pretty sure they don't tell ballerinas before they perform to break a leg. So please pirouette over here, Emily, and give your presentation.
Thank you very much, Peter. And actually, I'll share a little inside ballet tip that we don't say break leg, we say merde. So if you speak French, you know what that means. And you don't speak French, you want me to tell you? It's a bad word, it's shit.
It's horse shit.
Every day, every day I turn on CNN, I hear that word lately.
Let me see if I can share my screen. Is that working? Great. Okay, so thank you all for having me. I hope everyone can hear okay. And on the Zoom, maybe Judy, we can see your face, so give me a thumbs up if you can hear okay. Great, awesome, great. So thank you so much for inviting me. In our business, we say we have when we meet with clients or customers, we have an upfront contract. So my upfront contract with you guys today is I'm going to talk about who we are, the Observer Media Group, how we got where we are today. I'll touch a little bit on the state of the media industry itself, and then where we're going. So the Observer Media Group, we're a family-owned and operated publishing company. We publish 7 newspapers, 6 quarterly glossy magazines, 4 websites, multiple social media channels, and mobile apps, and employ more than 100 people in the state of Florida. I'll go a little bit about our history. That handsome guy in the middle is my grandfather, David Walsh, who just celebrated his 94th birthday. He is still the chairman emeritus of our company. He resides at Plymouth Harbor. Let's see, he is 2nd generation in the newspaper industry. My great-grandfather, his father, was also in the newspaper industry. He was in the circulation department, and he actually trained Derek Dunrakin, the former late Derek Dunrakin, who started Sun Media Group down in Venice. So the newspaper industry families, we all connect all over the country. There used to be a lot of families in the newspaper industry. So back in the day, this organization called Inland Press Association, which is now America's Newspapers, my grandfather would talk about the family owners meeting, which would have like 200 people there. And now at those meetings, we only have about 30 of us who show up. So that sort of shows you a little bit of the state of the industry, that it's turning into a lot of private equity firms own most of the newspapers in the United States today. But my grandparents, David and Ruth Bliles, they met at a newspaper. My grandmother was the social editor, and my grandfather also started out in the circulation department. And so her favorite joke was that she tipped my grandfather out of circulation. My grandfather worked for Stauffer Communications, which was back then another family-owned and operated newspaper company, and he was the editor and publisher of 12 daily newspapers in the Midwest. My parents they met in journalism school at the University of Missouri, where we still do a lot of recruiting to this day. So we have a lot of Mizzou journalism grads in our company. My mom passed away last year, but the two of them went all over the Midwest working at different newspapers. At one of their stops in Brookings, South Dakota, one day a snowmobile had to rescue my dad from the second floor of their townhouse so he could get to the paper to work that day. He was the editor there. And my mom said, that's it. So they moved to Miami, and and they thought that they would just try Florida for a little while and see where it took them. And they had plans to move back to the Midwest, but they never did. They stayed here in Florida. After Miami, my dad became the executive editor of Florida Trend magazine, and then the Southeast Bureau Manager of Forbes magazine. My sister and I were accepted by the School of American Ballet in New York City because Forbes was telling him he had to come to the home office in New York. My parents were looking for a place to live, and a newspaper broker called my dad and said that there's this little newspaper for sale on this 10-mile barrier island called Longboat Key, and I think you should look at it. So in 1995 is when the Observer Media Group was formed, when my parents acquired the Longboat Observer with my grandparents, David and Ruth Beliles, and a few investors at the time. So then I'm the second generation of the Observer Media Group, but fourth generation in the newspaper industry. This is my son, Reese, and I just added this new picture because that is a very old one. He's taller than me now, taller than his grandfather, and would hate that I had that picture of him when he was little, but that's my favorite picture. I love that picture. So as Peter mentioned, my first career was actually with the Sarasota Ballet. Interesting side story of how I got into the media business. I retired from the Sarasota Ballet in 2000 and then went to Florida State. And after Florida State, I said to my parents, you know what, I'm going to give this dance thing one more go, and I'm going to move to New York and try Broadway. My mom was very great at making her idea your idea. And she reminded me, like, you racked up a lot of credit card debt in college. Living in New York City is really expensive. First and last month's rent, you got to ride the subway. Maybe you should get a job. Oh, there happened to be a reporter position open at the Longboat Observer at the time. So I started working at the Observer and got into the black tie job where I was covering a lot of events and parties, which is really fun to do in your early 20s. And I remember one of my best friends was up in New York and she's like, I got us an apartment. When are you coming? Oh, we just had a blizzard. It's so cold. It's so lonely here. And I said, you know what? I'm not coming. And I'm glad that my path led me here. I love the media industry. I pretty much started out on the editorial side. And then when it was about the time where I was moving up on the editorial side, and the next step was to become a managing editor. And I looked around at all the managing editors, and their job is to sit in the office and read everyone's stories and edit them all day long. And I don't like sitting in an office all day long. So I was like, you know what? How about I go into sales? So I went into sales, and I loved that job. I felt like I was a marketing director for a bunch of different businesses, and then worked my way into helping us launch our websites online. I'll get into that a little bit later. So then editorial, sales, and then digital operations. And then in 2016, I believe I became the publisher of the Observers here locally. And in 2021, became the president of our company. So I oversee our Sarasota operations, the Business Observer, and our Orlando market operations. And I'll go into some of that in a little bit too. So like I said, in 1978 is when the Longboat Observer began. And it was started by another family, Ralph and Claire Hunter and their daughter Janet. And that little newspaper is our flagship publication, and it was the very beginning of our company when we started in 1995. So, I didn't know I left this slide in here. I meant to take this out, but this is the original Longboat Observer staff. And the reason why there's a yellow box from this gentleman, that's Bob Lewis. And he retired from our company 2 years ago, and he was 83. And so he was with us from the very beginning and just retired a couple years ago. Some of you may know his son, Rob Lewis, who works for the county. And Rob looks just like his dad, too. So our history, we always say that if we're not growing, we're dying, and we're very opportunistic. So these are some of the newspapers or publications that we started, and over here on the gone but not forgotten list are other startups that we had that way we either closed, that didn't work out, or that we have sold. As you'll see, our company has expanded and contracted over the years based on opportunities and growth in different areas. This is a list of all of our acquisitions, and you can see that some of them have now changed names or merged, and then again, some that didn't work out. And then two of our acquisitions, the West Orange Times and the Jacksonville Daily Record, both of those are more than 100 years old. Those newspapers are more than 100 years old. Our publisher in Jacksonville, I had her look for, I said, what are our archives like out there? And she goes, well, we have some of the original issues from the 1920s, but I'm too scared to touch them. So that's something we're working on, our digitization of our archives coming soon. So what we publish today, so we reach nearly 400,000 people in Florida every week with our print and digital publications. Our markets are, as you can see, on the Gulf Coast of Florida with our community weekly newspapers here in Sarasota, Longboat, Sarasota, Siesta Key, and East County, and our local magazines, which is LWR Life Magazine, Key Life Magazine, and Season Magazine. Then the Business Observer reaches from Tampa all the way down to Naples, and their website, businessobserverfl.com. In Orlando, we have the West Orange Times and Observer and the Southwest Orange Observer, along with Season Magazine and their magazine Local Motion, and their website, orangeobserver.com. And up in Jacksonville, we have the Jacksonville Daily Record with jacksdailyrecord.com, and they print some annual magazines as well, like Hospitality Magazine.
Are these all free?
No, they are not. Great question. And if you have questions, feel free to ask. We have some time at the end too, hopefully too. So our business publications are, those are paid publications. And in those paid publications, we print government, public, and legal notices, and we are required by law to have paid circulation. Now the law did change in last year where weekly newspapers, free weekly newspapers can publish legal notices. However, you have to be of a certain size and reach enough people, a percentage in your location. Now, our free community papers, we do have an app, which I will show you in a little bit, that you do have to pay for the app, but those newspapers are free.
I have the.
Oh, good. Awesome. Thank you. Good. Thank you so much. So our mission is to inspire our communities with extraordinary local content and to help our partners prosper. And our vision is innovate and elevate. So part of our mission is extraordinary content, and I'll talk about this a little bit more too when I go over the state of the media industry. All of our content is locally produced by local reporters who live and work in our communities. And some people are surprised by this too. The Longboat Observer has its own staff of 2 reporters and an editor. Sarasota has its own staff of reporters and East County Observer. We share content sometimes, but not very often. So every newspaper we have has its own dedicated staff of local reporters. And it pays off because we win a lot of awards. I think we need a new stand to show display our awards. I think the Sarasota Observer is up with the Florida Press Association again this year for General Excellence, which is the top award, meaning like the best newspaper in the state. So that's pretty exciting. And then our vision, innovate and elevate. So I think the dawn of the internet was in 1997. We didn't go online with our publications until 2009. So we were a little late to the game, but I would say that we have doubled down on our vision to innovate and elevate, and now have multiple, I wonder why I did that. digital publishing platform. So, and then what you can see here, I just did a screenshot of, this is a live, I think at like 2 o'clock view of our analytics that shows that there were like 244 people on the site in the last 30 minutes, 50 users in the last 5 minutes, and it shows, I don't know why it's doing that on the big screen, on my screen too. And then it'll also show you what stories people are reading right then. And we have this up on a big screen in our newsroom as well, so we can see what people are reading, where they're coming from, if they're coming on, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's amazing to see where people are coming from, if they're coming on their phones, on tablets or laptops. We have all of that information at our fingertips now. Okay, I wonder, because it's fine on here, I wonder if this, ooh, that just made it bigger. Here we go. Wait, here we go. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to show a quick video about our app that we launched last year.
Observer's e-newspaper edition. You can read it all on your favorite devices, including laptop.
Well, that's going to be, hold on. How do I mute? I am muted. On my screen. Okay, let's see. It's still echoing. Let's just skip the video. Oh wait, let me try this. Nope, I needed that. Anyway, we'll skip the video, but what I'll tell you about that. So the app is what on your phone or your tablet, and you can access the actual print newspaper, how it is in print every week. However, the cool thing is that you can, when you click on an article, oh goodness, that's gonna make me. You can click on the article and you have a special text view without ads. You can share articles. You can translate articles to different languages. There's an audio version, and it's a great way to access, the newspaper if you're not at home, if you're up north at your other home. Great way to read the newspaper. And then coming soon, here we go, I can show you. So here's the special text view where you can read the text view of the articles, but you just flip through, you can zoom in, zoom out. And again, I think you can read it to you, all sorts of things. There are all sorts of features on here that I don't even know how to use, so it's pretty techy. But what's coming soon is, since we have all the editions of the paper, but then we also have our magazines. You can read our magazines on the app as well, and some of our special sections. And then coming soon, we're gonna add a tab on there with the latest links from our website, yourobserver.com. So that's one of the ways we are innovating and elevating at the Observer. And then just a quick overview of what's going on with the news industry. So I'm sure you've seen the headlines. We have a joke in the newspaper industry that we're our worst marketers because we love to print headlines about how the newspaper industry is dying. It is in flux, right? You can see these graphs that, this is for U.S. daily newspapers, circulation continues to decline. This graph over here shows newspaper employment from 2005 to 2022. I mean, it's gone down. This is an interesting new graph that shows the different types of ownership of newspapers. So nonprofit news organizations are popping up all over the place. So that's growing. 50% of ownership of all newspapers is still owned, locally owned, but 25% is local nonprofits, and then 16% is state nonprofit owned newspapers, and then only 9% of statewide newspapers exist, are locally owned. And then I added this headline on here because I read this story today. So there are newspapers, EO Media Group, they're out in Oregon. They are closing, I think shutting down 3 of their newspapers. They're reducing daily circulation of their newspapers, meaning so from 7 days, they're going down to 5. I think the Bradenton Herald, I think just cut another day as well. So I think they only come out 2 or 3 times a week now. The Tampa Bay Times only comes out twice in print, and they are mostly an app as well. So this trend is mostly affecting daily newspapers. I think one of the reasons why that's happening is because they used a lot of wire content, right? And so it's not local content. It's so funny. That's what, when I read industry articles, they're like, oh, local content, that's the key. And I'm like, duh, we've been doing that forever. Of course it's the key. So, you know, when you go and get your daily newspaper, if you have some of those AP stories or wire stories, you've already read about it online. So that's the issue. Our strategy with content is that we break news online on yourobserver.com, and then in print is an article that explains, you know, why this matters to you. So it's like more of an in-depth read in the print newspaper.
So Emily, when
yeah.
you say circulation is shrinking, that's a combination of both physical paper and digital, is that it?
No, actually no. So digital readership is on the rise. I believe that the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, their digital paying subscribers are in, you know, the millions, and so their digital readership is largest. Actually, our digital yourobserver.com is our largest audience. So, for instance, we get about nearly 300,000 people visit yourobserver.com each month. So that translates to about 70,000 people every week, right? And our largest print newspaper in this area is the Sarasota Observer, and we print about 20,000 of those. If you combine Longboat, Sarasota, Siesta, and East County together, we print 60,000 newspapers a week. So 70,000 people a week on yourobserver.com, that is our largest audience. So digital continues to grow. When I think a stat is also too that I think only 2,000 counties in the United States have newspapers now. So it's really shrunk. It is a factor. However, Florida's different. Now, this is the Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. They do a local news initiative study every year, and this is the 2003 one. America's Newspapers, which is a trade organization, is not really sure what methodology they use, because it says, you know, in Sarasota, it says there's only 3 newspapers and they're missing 2 of ours. So, you know, so I'm not really sure, but, you know, this does show you that Florida does have, there's only 22 counties in Florida that have only 1 newspaper and 9 without a news source. However, Florida is trending much, even though that seems kind of down in the dumps, Florida is actually trending much better. So I'm the recent past chair of the Florida Press Association. Our membership continues to grow, which is amazing. What's interesting is that we just changed our bylaws to allow online-only publications to be full-blown members. Before they didn't used to get a vote, but now they do. And a lot of these online-only news websites are starting print publications to go along with it. So that's a really interesting trend, and that's different from the rest of the nation. But as you know, our population in Florida is better suited for newspapers. It's a little older, everybody's retired, they have more time to read the newspapers. So, you know, it's a great place to be for the newspaper industry. And then just where we're going, we have a saying in our company, we go by per ardua ad astra, by struggle to the stars. And our goal is to be the go-to medium in our niche. one of my biggest pet peeves is when people talk about the newspaper, they only refer to the Sarasota Herald Tribune. Well, come on, we print more newspapers than the Sarasota Herald Tribune does these days. I want people to, when they're talking about the newspaper, they're talking about the Observer. And the amazing thing is that we're continuing to grow. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens out in I-75. I was recently at a Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance luncheon, and Laura Cole, who's the vice president of Schroeder Manatee Ranch, said that in Lakewood Ranch, they have 70,000 residents now, which is more than the city of Sarasota. And it's not done. They're only at 60% build out. So they have a lot more to go. So I have a feeling where we will continue to expand will also be out east. That's sort of the struggle we have right now, is because people out in Lakewood Ranch, even if they're not in Lakewood Ranch SMR proper, people who live outside of Lakewood Ranch still consider themselves in Lakewood Ranch. So, but now Lakewood Ranch spans 2 counties. So how do you cover that? You know, they're in Manatee and in Sarasota. We managed to do it on Longboat, but Longboat has its own town. And SMR, I don't think they have the residents out there have any plans of incorporating. They tried it 10 years ago. But anyway, so do we start another newspaper out there? Do we increase the circulation? I would say the East County Observer is probably the only newspaper in the world that has this problem, where we get calls every week of residents out there wanting us to print more newspapers. And the struggle with that is that if we print more newspapers, then it drives the costs up, right? And then we'd have to raise our advertising revenue. And then we price ourselves out, or not revenue, advertising costs, and then we would price ourselves out of the market. So right now we're sort of talking about having some locations and maybe some Publixes or different locations out there where we charge for them to see if that will help. Anyway, so that's a conundrum. And then the goal is also to get more people using the app. When we started yourobserver.com, it took probably 10 years to really get to where we are today, and people changed their habits. So that's something that we're working on. And that is it. Thank you so much. I don't know why that keeps doing that. And so I think we have some time for questions.
Oh,
Do we have time for
absolutely.
questions?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah.
How would you describe the observers, particularly the Sarasota Observer, describe their editorial policy?
The editorial policy. So
Your dad's editorials are fascinating to read.
So there's 2 things, okay? So if the editorial policy, if you're talking about the editorial page or Matt's editorials or the opinion page.
The editorial.
Okay, so the rest of the paper is unbiased, right? We try to tell both sides of every story in the newspaper. The opinion page is Matt's opinion, and that's all it is. And if you don't like it, just skip over it. That is what it is. Now, I write a column once a month. It'll come out. It came out today in Longboat, and it comes out tomorrow, where I kind of focus more on local nonprofits and things. Like tomorrow, I'm talking about Suncoast Charities for Children, how they're trying to raise money for the annual fireworks celebration, and I think it's important that we do that for our community and that we rally behind them. And it's a win-win for the community, because we keep our annual celebration and tradition, and children's charities in Sarasota, get help. Like how's that a losing situation? So, I tend to focus on more local nonprofit issues and things like that. But the opinion page is, and then I think he has a guest contributor once a week who is also things to
Libertarian?
yes, thank you, libertarian, yes, in nature.
Well, what's fascinating about your dad is that I met him 20 years ago, and he inspires loyalty. Whether you agree with him or not, he inspires loyalty on the staff.
And the what he would say to you right now if he was here is that the point of his columns are to spark discussion and to spark thought. Unfortunately, a lot of newspapers across the company have stopped their opinion pages. They've stopped the political endorsements. And, you know, to me, I think that you lose a little bit of what a newspaper is all about, right? And, you know, the other thing about newspapers is, you know, if people don't agree with Matt, we print their letters to the editor. You know, I even once I forget, when he tends to talk about national politics is when it gets a little haywire. During the last election, I got a bunch of like letters addressed to me, but like, you know, the cutout letters from a magazine, like they're like threatening letters. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know why you want to, you know, don't be mad at me, you know, write a letter to the editor, like, you know, have a little courage, put your name on it and we'll print it, you know, that if you don't like his stuff.
So you get to see a lot of all of Florida through the eyes of your reporters and how would you rate the health of Sarasota based on what you see, the data you see, against the rest of the state?
Sarasota is unique. Sarasota is amazing. Now, every market is different, right? And we were having this discussion yesterday that one of the struggles with growing and expanding to different markets is it's really hard to keep your culture. And the Observer's culture is we work really hard, but we also like to have a lot of fun. So I actually keep encouraging. I found some old issues of the Longwood Observer, and I was telling our executive editor, Kat Winkert, I'm like, can't we have a little more fun in the paper? We're so serious now, you know? But we like to have fun as well. So the cultures in our different markets are very specific to them. Orlando is their specific, Jacksonville's different. I always say that, here's a great way to put it. So I was going around the state helping to install this new editorial software system that we were working on. And each editorial team, I said, pick out the restaurant you want to go eat at. And so in Sarasota, they picked Mediterranean. In Winter Garden, they picked Panera. And at the time we had newspapers in Palm Coast, we hadn't acquired Jacksonville yet. Palm Coast, Florida, which is Daytona market, they picked Cracker Barrel. So it shows you the cultures. Oh, and actually we had a Plant City newspaper at the time too, which is a partnership with the Tampa Bay Times. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is the best pizza you'll ever taste. They picked this pizza place. It's the worst pizza I've ever had in my life. It was so gross. So, but Sarasota is definitely thriving.
You're keeping your April Fool edition.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have any more
Yes.
board members, Patrick?
Yes, Emily, I don't know if you spoke with David Lough about this, but I know we put out a monthly newsletter and we try and put out information about what's happening with the city, and oftentimes cite, you know, city articles, but oftentimes there's a nice write-up in your Observer, and we link to that and try and make sure we identify that. Is that a fair use, or have you provided a way that we can check in to have a free, non-paywall article?
Well, on yourobserver.com, it's free and it will always remain free.
Okay.
Now, the articles on the Business Observer, those are, because that's a paid publication now, but if you want to use them, you can always just reach out to me and we can make sure that link is available or whatever.
You talk about the impact of AI.
Yes. So interestingly enough, let me back up. We recently set an editorial policy, and I'm talking about the news articles, right? Not the opinion page, but I was sure that Matt would do the same for opinion page, that we are not using AI to generate content. We are not using AI to generate images. However, we may use AI to create graphs or, you know, or different, we won't use it to replace photography. Let's put it that way. We might use it to do that. Now, in the world of digital publishing, when we post articles on our website, we have to write like 3 or 4 different headlines that are SEO optimized, so they show up better in Google's algorithm. And so we might put our headline, the one that we wrote, into AI and say, generate 10 more headlines for me, or generate metadata that it's nothing that the public would see, right? And why not have a computer writing for a computer? You know, like it takes a lot of the reporter's time to write all the different headlines and the metadata. you know, to get those stories served up in Google's algorithm. So we may use it for that. I tried to use it today to create a graph for you showing the decline in circulation and ad revenue, and it gave me back a bunch of code, and I tried to whatever. So, you know, it doesn't do everything that you need. So,
Research.
no, we do not use it for research, no. Yes.
How do the clipping services affect you guys? I mean, the reason I say that, you seem to pop up a lot more frequently for local information when you have a local, some of the clipping services that say, you know, you're in Sarasota, so then obviously a lot of your stuff pops up in that. How does that?
You mean
affect
like
guys?
on Google?
Well, on Google, or, you know, like Flipboard, or, you know, some of these different.
Oh,
clipping-
like the apps, like the Newsbreak app or things
Yeah.
like that. No, that actually is great for us because it drives traffic to our website, where in turn we serve advertising. So for instance, we serve about 10 million ad impressions per month on yourobserver.com. And those are all locally sold ads too. So we love, you can link to our articles all the time in your e-newsletter. Please do. That means we can just serve another ad. Yeah.
Well, no, because you guys seem to show up more so than the Sarasota Herald.
Well, and I think
Because you guys have local content. you know?
correct. That is why. And actually Google rewards you if you have more local content. Like if you're using, so the Sarasota Herald Tribune is owned by Gannett, and that's, so you see their USA Today network stories, right? There's a lot of that in the paper. And if that article, which is probably run on a multiple of their websites, then Google doesn't reward them for that. Like, so if it's one article on one site, you get better rankings. So that's probably why.
Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Either one. Jim?
Oh, I was just wondering, in a thriving community, population always growing, have you ever considered 2 issues?
So yes, I think Matt's dream is to have a Sunday edition. We've talked a few times about, in that Sunday edition, maybe that's where you pull stories from all of the newspapers into one. I don't know. We've gone back and forth about it. One of our markets, when we owned the Palm Coast Observer, they actually went to twice a week. They did, I think they did Wednesday and Saturday, and it didn't work out for them. So, you know, I don't know. It depends. But yes, we've talked about it. No, it's not on the list at the moment. But yes, we have talked about it.
And Richard?
Speaking of piano, is there any major market in Florida they don't own?
Gannett? In Florida,
Palm Beach Post, Sunset, Miami Herald,
right. So the
Tampa Trib,
Tampa Tribune is now Tampa Bay Times.
they're not part of.
No. So the Tampa St. Pete is not owned by Gannett. You're correct. Miami is not owned by Gannett. Orlando, Palm Beach is not owned
I
by,
thought Palm Beach Post,
yes, they are. Sorry. Fort Lauderdale is not owned by Gannett.
the Sunset.
Correct. And then,
They control an awful lot of Florida, I think is my point I'm trying to make.
yes, they have 27 newspapers in Florida, and mostly the dailies. Yes. Yes.
The Sarasota Herald Tribune has made an effort to do more investigative reporting. I mean, I'm sure you saw all the stuff of Sarasota County Planning Department. I'm assuming they're going to do the city of Sarasota. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So are you working on that? I mean, by the way, I like Andrew Warfield a lot. I think his
Thank you.
content is the best in the
Thank
city.
you.
But are you going anywhere in that direction that the Herald Tribune is trying to do?
No, I mean, the Herald Tribune, Gannett, a lot of those big metro newspapers, their only goal is to get a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And so that's how you do that. But the problem with investigating reporting is it takes a lot of time. It takes a long time to make sure that you are, you know, reporting the truth. You got to interview a lot of people. You got to have sources that aren't anonymous. And that's expensive to have one reporter working on one story for a long time that doesn't show up in the paper, right? So we've done some bigger packages. We haven't done one in a while. We've done, like, we did a big special like package on red tide. I think we did one on affordable housing once. But if something warrants it, then absolutely we would put someone on it. But no, we don't have any plans to.
Yeah. We have time for one more question. I was gonna ask the people on Zoom if they have any questions for Emily. No? One more question, if anybody has one more question.
I just have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just taking off my commissioner hat and putting on my citizen hat, I, for one, am really thankful that we have the Observer.
Thank you.
I consider it our local paper. It's unfortunate that the Herald Tribune has diminished their coverage of local stories.
Yeah.
And where they have diminished, I think the Observer has stepped up, and I feel that we're very lucky whether you agree or you don't agree with the opinion page. I appreciate that it does say my opinion.
Yeah.
It's crystal clear to everyone. It's my opinion,
Yeah.
but it's there.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the paper, I feel like it is, it's very much our local paper, from picnics to kids getting, athletic achievement awards, to local events, to also what's going on in our area. And so I feel like we're very lucky to have the Observer in Sarasota. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you so much.
And your team is really, really, really very professional. So
Thank you so much. I appreciate
So do you
that.
have an
Josie
inside, do you have an insight on Cops Corner?
I'll second that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Do I have an insight on Cops Corner? So the funny thing is back in the day when Cops Corner started, the police chief on Longboat Key wrote the Cops Corner column himself. And they were quite funny when he did it.
Yeah.
And so, no, we get the police reports, and then our reporters, summarize them. But the interesting thing is, actually, one of my late mother's longest wishes was to do a Best of Cops Corner book. And I have a 14-year-old indentured servant this summer, and he's currently pulling all of the past Cops Corner content. And we have another friend who, my mom's best friend, is helping pull those. And so hopefully you will see a Best of Cops Corner book soon. And if you meant Pat, no, he doesn't tell me everything that's going on in the police department.
All right, well, thank you very much, Emily, for coming.
Yeah.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. And thank you.
Yeah, I'll stick around.
All right, moving on to, well, it's not really new business, but Patrick's going to give us an update on the DSCA website and the city website.
Share this. So I'll just give you a quick update. We were contacted by the city's information technology department a month or two ago. They were starting a website upgrade process. They're working with Granicus to come up with that. So this is the current city's website, and they're going through a major redo, picking out what's needed in that. I attended the first meeting on behalf of DSA. This is one of the outside stakeholders interested in that. And they provided a link to 3 other sites where this particular package of Granicus has been implemented. And to start taking a look at it, I've gone through some of these and trying to look at how they lay them out. And when you do a search, what comes up with that. I would like to offer, if there's anyone else within our membership here that would like to work with me on doing some evaluations and highly like any feedback. I do know that there is a representative from CCNA also, but since we have a lot of issues with what's going on downtown, we want to make sure that we provide some good input. And also the perspective of the kinds of things that our downtown population is looking for, which oftentimes is related to construction issues or other land development issues or things going on in the city commission planning board. So there's oftentimes those kind of civic activities that are of interest to our members, and especially our member reps. So that's one of the perspectives I'm trying to look at is, would their new interface provide us better searches and what ways and things like that. So I will throw that out there. If anybody is interested, contact me and I'll get you connected into that. Now, in following through on Emily's innovate and elevate, this is what DSCA is doing in our innovation. Now, I have a question here. How many of you were participants or remember the first Zoom DSCA board meeting we did? Brandon?
Wasn't it like a few months after COVID?
No, it was April 1st, 2020.
Oh.
We had our annual members meeting scheduled at the Embassy Suites for April 1st. And on March 20th, we were scrambling, what do we do? Well, we loaded up Zoom and away we went. And we had our annual members meeting starting April 1st, and we've had monthly meetings on Zoom ever since. So that was part of our kind of innovation to help elevate our members to get more involvement. And looking around the room, I would say we got a lot more involvement than we've ever had in our work. So this is an area that we are investigating. And it's, share this. Emily, you were asked a question about artificial intelligence. Well, in my research on that, most of the public AI apps are based upon a large language model, which has a lot of public data. In my research, I came across an application that's based upon a personal language model. It knows nothing except what you tell it. And I'm right now probably at about the 3rd or 4th grade level, trying to teach this thing a few things. Gets that 5th grade level where it knows a whole lot about Tyrannosaurus Rex, and if you ask a question, it'll give you 5 pages of information. So this is what's involved in training it's called a small language model for use where you can determine what the data is for that. And so like right now, I just have a question there, tell me about this. And so it knows about public information on the website. The other thing we can do with this particular thing is create personas. And so right now we will have a public persona with a published website that and that from this URL, public can post questions on that. The other key thing that we're is what we're building now is a member portion available only if you log into the DSCA member website, where we might be able to answer questions related to things like how many parking spaces, other questions related to land development, because it's going to know most about the latest land development applications going in. So this is just an example of something that we're trying to experiment with to determine what types of query services we can best offer to our members as we go forward. So that's kind of the activity there. And right now, we're trying to determine which of these services or searches would be a benefit.
Patrick, are you taking a lot of city data to feed into this?
Yes.
Is that how it works? And it's going to be continuous as data keeps coming?
Well, this is part of the experiment is what are the data sources and what changes? Things like a land development site plan, once it's approved, it's published, and that's published data and so forth. There may be other changes that come along, things like that. But a lot of it is, tracking some of the things that are interesting. This is part of what we're trying to determine is what are the areas of particular interest that might help somebody do a more formative kinds of query to understand things. So it's right now just spending a few months to try and look at what's involved in that. The key thing we've learned is that, yes, having the ability to manage your data is important, but then having the processes to easily update it. And one thing we have discovered, it has integrations to the Google Drive folder. You can integrations to a Gmail account, Instagram, Facebook. So those is where your data feeds can come in. You have a data feed from an Instagram account that comes into a different persona, and that persona is charted to react differently, respond differently.
So do we have an observer persona coming in?
I mean, if I can find a 14-year-old indentured servant, that's my
They're pretty good on tech.
Yeah, well, I must say, if anybody has any kids for the summer, send them our way too, because, I mean, the thing I found out is just learning about this, anyone, this is their career. If you're over, under 50, you're under 60, you gotta learn this stuff. I mean, you're gonna have to know it. And it's not good way sometimes, but the number of new jobs it's creating to figure out how to train the dragons, training these things is not insignificant job, but the better trained, the better response. And so that's a refinement process, figuring out how to do that best. But it's coming, so we're just gonna try anything. So.
Is it a simple process to have it, say, read the Observer every week or every publication that comes out? Is that a simple process, or is it much more complicated to tie into your?
Can we read an article and write?
I bet if you put in a link, or if you just put in yourobserver.com into it and said, summarize or pull the top stories, it could do that for you.
Or
Yes,
all the stories?
Yeah.
No, I've had it go in there and say, read this webpage and give me a 1-paragraph summary and cite 3 things that I might do as a follow-up. Ding, ding. Okay. So, limited uses in certain ways can be very helpful.